I'm Jessica Riccio, Senior Solutions Marketing Manager for the EMEA region at Okta, and I'm very excited to be speaking to you all today at Oktane Online. And my goal for this session is simple, that you all walk away with a better understanding of why and how identity can unlock the future of hybrid work in Europe. So before we dive in though, just some housekeeping rules. I will be answering questions to the presentation via the chat, so don't hesitate to ask away. So let's dive in. So what's the state of work across Europe today? And here we see the three critical factors: risk, new work models, and the talent gap that European organizations have had to consider in order to cross the chasm from a model centered around business continuity. So this was essentially a short-term and reactive response to an event, COVID in this instance, to resilient model, which is a long-term vision, a more proactive approach that supports business growth, as well as the flexibility and demands of today's workforce. But why shift or change in the first place? I mean, the reason is that because after nearly 2 years of this great global work experiment that we've all had to go through, the impacts to organizations are just materializing. So let's dive deeper into some of these factors. So let's start with risk. Now, according to Okta's hybrid work report, 32% of organizations consider cybersecurity as their main challenge when it comes to implementing these hybrid work models. But why? Why is security top of mind for business leaders when it comes to hybrid work? Well, because of the cyber threats, they're continuously rising, and organizations have really had to redefine their risk appetite because as more of their workforce cross the chasm from an office setting, so, this traditionally from a security standpoint is more of a controlled setting, to a home or anywhere setting where the devices and networks, they're no longer under the organization's control. The traditional perimeter or point security solutions, they're not valid anymore. They fall apart. And thus, they've really had to reevaluate the security capabilities so as to ensure the balance between security and employee experience is maintained. And this is why security is crucial. It's critical that they work on a model that reduces risk. Now, the second factor is all about crossing the chasm to new work models that adapt to changes in the business, that adapt to external events, but at the same time also need to support those critical business initiatives. For example, we see a lot of companies that are navigating the economic downturn by optimizing or revisiting their real estate strategy. We also see other companies that are trying to understand, what is the environmental impact or what is the employee well-being impact of these work models? Do these work models support their ESG initiatives? However, where we see a lot of organizations that are struggling is to align their work models to their technology investments. And, these next two data points here, they really showcase this. So, if 52% of organizations expect more than 50% of their workforce to be hybrid, however, only 30% of the employees are saying, hey, the technology we're using is productive, there's a significant gap there. And this is really a red flag to organizations that they're on their way to accumulating technical debt. And this is with technology that's, complex, that causes friction, that's unable to adapt or scale to the changes. And the result is you're going to have exhausted IT teams and you're going to have a workforce that's underproductive and unengaged. And now the final factor here is the talent gap. And according to IDC's Future of Work survey in April this year, the war for talent was all too real, with the Great Resignation seeing at least 1 in 3 EU employees changing jobs soon. Why are they changing though? They're looking for better workplace experiences. And here again, this should be a signal, a red flag for organizations that they're accumulating cultural debt. So with this being said then, how can organizations tackle cultural debt and better attract and retain talent? And the answer can be found here in this last data point, with 44% of EU organizations prioritizing their health and well-being over work more so than before the pandemic. Organizations should really consider models that are more conducive to work-life balance, that can facilitate their collaboration, and that can improve employee experience. We've been talking about resiliency here, and what we're going to do next, I would really like to look at how a resilient foundation that's built into the key areas of the business can deliver great rewards. So let's start off with an easy question here. What are the characteristics of a resilient work model? And a resilient foundation is one that's sustainable, that's scalable, and that's secure. And all of this resiliency needs to be built into the people, processes, and technologies that are driving the business. Why? Because the work environment today is disparate. People, devices, they're everywhere. The world is in constant flux with threats, and risks that are continuously increasing. So business leaders, what they need is they need models that provide a stable and secure base that gives them room to adapt, to grow, to be agile and flexible in the face of change, whether it's the workforce that's changing, whether it's the processes that's changing, or the technology, and of course, even, consider the external factors that are changing, the cyber landscape, the economy, macro trends. And, basically by integrating and building resilience into those drivers, into the people, processes, and technologies, what they're doing is they're inherently designing consistency within this disparate environment. It's not easy. In fact, it's a balancing act, balancing the need to be productive, efficient, to manage costs, to, drive that top and bottom line growth on one hand. On the other hand, having to be accountable for risk, for the well-being of your employees and of the environment. And that's a big load to carry for leaders, but when done right, can really create lots of value for not just your business, but for your workforce. So with this being said, obvious question would be, what work model best encompasses this resiliency? What work model can create value for my business? And really here, there's no right or wrong answer. It really depends on many factors. It depends notably on culture, on tech maturity, on legislation in some cases, and many other factors. So with this being said, what I want to do next is really look at and dive deep into how 3 countries in the EU are approaching hybrid work. So what does a new workplace look like for each of these countries? While a hybrid work approach has become the norm for most countries across the EU, each one is approaching it differently. We see the French going back to the office much more. We see the British, preferring to work remotely. And of course, the Dutch are being pioneers in their own right by passing a bill on the topic. So let's start with France, which is my adoptive country. With 71% of French workers saying that they don't work remotely at least once a week, and 2/3 of French organizations implementing an office-first approach, they're going back to the office much more than their EU counterparts. But why? A social work culture is very important in France. Face time is critical, so much so that it can affect career advancement. French organizations are prone to proximity bias. They aren't actively investing in proximity bias or to counteract it as much as Sweden or Netherlands, per se. The good news is that French organizations, and it's 44% according to Okta's hybrid work report, who are currently not investing in proximity bias, are considering to do so in the next year or so. So this is great news. Now, from a technical maturity perspective, France has one of the lowest adoption rates, cloud adoption rates of any country in the EU, which could explain why they might rate certain challenges like having the right technology or getting collaboration right higher than the EU average. And it's almost 10% higher, actually. And you really can't have one without the other, right? You can't, it's having that right technology that facilitates the collaboration, right? So in order for them to cross that chasm to an experience and resilient-based model is going to require more investment on their part when it comes to, investing in cloud-based technologies and, of course, collaborative tools. So if we cross the channel and go to the UK, we can safely say that the British have truly embraced hybrid work. And the models where they generally rate higher is the fully remote models and the flexible working models, okay? This is where employees choose the location and working hours. But what is the impact of this? Real estate. Both the Telegraph and the Guardian have reported that on average, there were 30% less people traveling to work in London in July than before the pandemic. And we've seen this consistent, average from August, September, October as well, right? And we've also seen that remote working could make up to 20% of London office space redundant. So what can we deduce from these findings? Well, I can comfortably say that British organizations are going to be reevaluating their real estate strategy. And in particularly, they're going to be optimizing it and looking at ways, to invest in creating centers of work experience. Basically, they're going to be redefining the purpose of the office space. Now, if we go to the Netherlands has really distinguished themselves from other countries in the EU bloc because they were able to pass a bill and introduce in the Flexible Working Act a bill that states that employees can request to work partly from home. Okay. And while it's not a legal right, employers do need a good reason to refuse such a request. So what is the impact here? The impact here is that Dutch organizations are going to need to consider this legislation into their working strategy. And I really do believe that this bill is going to drive Dutch organizations towards adopting a hybrid model. So if we continue with this line of thought, what should they do in order to successfully implement, and what should they focus on to successfully implement these hybrid models? Well, with 35% of Dutch organizations struggling to get the collaboration right, and 27% focusing or prioritizing employee well-being, they're going to be focusing more on improving cultural debt. And to achieve this in a hybrid environment, they're going to need to invest in collaborative tools and technologies while at the same time ensuring that the employees have that seamless, secure, and easy access to them. So with this being all said, regardless of how each country is approaching the return to work, regardless of the disparity of hybrid work models, what is the one foundational element that will ensure that they can safely leap and cross that chasm? And that is identity. By taking an identity-first approach, organizations are going to be able to future-proof their work models. They're going to be able to unlock the full potential of people, process, and technology that drive their business, because what does identity bring to the table? Identity brings visibility, automation, and security across their digital ecosystem. Identity removes friction. Identity enables secure and quick access to the applications, to the technology, and identity improves collaboration. So what do I mean? What am I talking about when I talk about visibility? By visibility, I'm talking about identity that allows you to see the digital ecosystem, that allows you to see the devices and the technologies and the people. And by seeing, you can control. And by control, you can manage who is accessing what tech, what application, and with what device and when, right? Automation. So when I talk about automation, what I'm talking about here is by bringing automation into the system and automating processes, what are you doing? You're making it simpler, you're making it faster for your employees and your IT teams to work. With security, so for security, all I simply mean at the basic level, identity secures your first point of attack, your weakest link, your people, your employees. So basically with identity first, the result is that organizations are going to be able to reduce cultural debt with improved and safe user experiences. They're going to be able to break down silos in their processes with improved agility, efficiency, and an integrated ecosystem. They're going to be able to reduce technical debt by building intelligence into their system with identity that adapts and scales to their changing digital landscape. And at the end of the day, guys, like the slide says, identity makes work work. And I'm actually proof of that. When I started at Okta, I was able to work from day one, not day two, but day one. And I had access, to all my apps and tools, and they were accessible, available with the quick click of one button from day one. And it was so seamless that I forget sometimes, that there's a whole bunch of intelligence and security powering all of this. It's transparent to me. And since this was my first experience as a remote worker, a fully remote worker, it was essential to me that the process be seamless and frictionless. So what I want to do next is, I just talked about how Okta helped, make work work for me. What I want to talk about next is show you how Okta Identity helped 3 customers make work work. So let's start with NG. So NG Group, they're a global power, natural gas, and energy services company. And one day what they decided is that they needed to move to a flat business model that was distributed across 24 geographically oriented business units. And they needed this all in an extremely short timeline, okay? Key to them was really finding an identity vendor that could, connect all the business units globally, that could make the merger and acquisition experience simpler and faster. But they were also looking for a vendor that was reliable, because let's not forget that NG is critical infrastructure. And it's crucial that they be able to access their IT solutions at all time. High availability is very important for them. They were also looking for neutrality because they were integrating a wide variety of vendors and applications. And also they were looking for a vendor that was future ready because they needed someone that can adapt and scale with their changing landscape and business initiatives. So how did we help NG? Well, first we provided NG with the ability to give 120,000 of their global employees, and this was including 50,000 field workers, seamless and secure access with our single sign-on. And this was over to 1,900 applications. We also gave them the capability to automate the provisioning and the deprovisioning of these users. The second thing we did is that we helped them to deploy Office 365 in over 60 countries in just 6 months. Third, we were able to connect and consolidate over 100 Active Directory domains using our Universal Directory. And finally, we provided them with elaborated and sophisticated workflows to streamline operational processes which simplified their merger and acquisitions operations. So what was the benefit for NG here? They saved time. They reduced their time to deploy by 70%. Remember that 6 months to deploy Office 365. They were more agile. 2 weeks versus 2 months to begin collaborating with a newly acquired domain following merger and acquisitions. They were more productive. This was for 90% of users with just SSO and lifecycle management. Now, if we go back to the UK, the TANET, so who is TANET? So TANET is government. So they're a district council in Southeast England, and they provide local government services, okay? Now, the challenge with TANET was how do we enable a workforce of 400 employees to work remotely as securely and as effectively as possible, and all this during the pandemic. And TANET being government, they had unique technological requirements, that required bespoke solutions and workarounds. And they really had a lot of applications in use, and these applications needed to integrate with shared HR and ICT systems. And accessing these applications was becoming just so much harder for their employees. So how did Okta come to the rescue? Well, first thing we helped them with was with integration. We were able to integrate G Suite and HR systems with Okta's SSO and multi-factor authentication, which not only strengthened their security posture, but also made it easier for their employees to access these applications from home. And at the time, it had over 70 applications to access, and they had to be accessed in seconds, okay? The second way we helped them was with automation. We were able to automate their HR tasks with lifecycle management, which further boosted their agility and security by keeping the access rights updated at all times. And this means that onboarding, instead of taking days, took minutes. At the end of the day, TANET was very pleased with Okta's solutions, and for many reasons. One, it was transparent. Remember, transparency was important to me as well when I started with Okta. It was transparent for their employees because they were able to keep using the same HR tools. They were able to keep using the same HR systems and master directory. They needed no additional training. They were able to get up and running in no time. They were able to save, whether it was saving money. So they were able to save, I think it was over £90,000. And this was as a result of time that was not lost resolving multi-factor authentication prompts. They were able to save time. They saved, I think, 1 to 3 months to integrate an app. And they were able to save resources. They were able to gain over 4,000 hours of improved productivity across the council. So we're here. We've reached the end of our journey on, the future of hybrid work in Europe. And if there's one thing that I want you guys to take away today is that this journey starts with identity. And with an identity cloud that's future-proof, that's intuitive, that's intelligent, and that's trusted by design. But what I mean by all these words, what do I mean by intuitive? Well, here I'm talking about a solution that reduces the complexity of building, integrating, and maintaining identity, because identity is hard. And I'm also here referring by a solution that, is built in the cloud, that's for everyone, for all devices and applications. And by intelligence here, I'm talking about the technology. I'm talking about the workflows that streamline and improve user journeys. This is about a solution that can adapt to an organization's changing digital landscape. And by trusted, I'm talking about a solution that can skillfully balance security effectiveness, privacy requirements, and availability, the necessity to be always on. And I'm certain that with such a solution, organizations can really empower, their employees, their partners with the best, with the state of the art, user experience, while at the same time protecting trust. And this is what Okta essentially, delivers. Because if you remember at the beginning of my presentation, I talked about it all being a balancing act. Balancing the expectations or the need of security versus usability, of efficiency versus innovation. And this is why time and again, our customers, turn to Okta to maintain that balance. Thank you for participating and taking the time today. And I really do hope you enjoyed this session and enjoy the rest of Oktane Online. Thank you.